We will go back to the other stuff
Okay.
after the fact, but I want to be respectful of our guest's time.
Greetings.
Bill, buddy,
Good
how are you,
evening.
sir?
Good evening, guys. Nice to be here. Nice to see you all. Are there any girls involved here, or am I stuck with a bunch of dudes on Saturday night?
I mean, I got nice
Um,
hair.
We have
my
we have two in here, Bill, but they
Nice.
are pretty you
my
can
wife Dee is here.
be open
Oh,
as
good.
much as you want, sir.
Good, good, good. Well, thank you for inviting me to participate tonight.
Thank
Appreciate
you,
it.
sir. All right. Uh so I got it. Hold on. If anybody well, first I'll put it this way. If anybody has questions, let me know in the chat so we can keep this organized. But yeah, I was telling everybody earlier, Bill, as far as when it comes to the movie,
Yeah.
that when Stephen King wrote the book, he went with the 58 vehicle. He wanted to do something different than the what's because I'm not a car guy. The 50 tr Trans Ams or stuff. Were you aware of something like that when you came on for the movie?
Well, not when I came on for it, but about I want to say a year or maybe it was a year and a half after that. I was doing a movie in New Mexico, and I got a call asking me to come meet Stephen for a picture that he was going to be directing for Dino De Laurentiis. And it was called Maximum Overdrive, if you remember that movie. He had gotten a deal with De Laurentiis to do two pictures. He wrote one, or if he wrote both of them, he could direct one. So Maximum Overdrive, and he invited me to Beverly Hills Hotel so that I could meet with him and talk about the movie. And it was at that time in that conversation when he told me that Christine was chosen because it was an odd duck car for the era. And he always felt like an odd guy out in high school. So the Christine car was a 350 V8 with two 4-barrel carbs and a push button transmission. So it straddled this line between trying to be kind of keep up with the cars, the muscle cars that were starting in, and the idea behind that, and still was kind of a family car. It was still like it was still bench seats and all of that. So it was an odd duck car. They only made 5,000 of them originally, and that's why he chose that car.
Awesome. Before I continue, and obviously a couple of people said in the chat about having questions, etc. A couple of folks had reached out because I had made it known that Bill is open to doing some autographs and things like that. I'm gonna give Bill the information when we're done. Probably tomorrow morning to be best. That way we can figure out, payment and all that fun stuff as well. I just wanted to get that out there. We will get you set up fans for that. No problem. But Mr. White, I'll bring you up first because you heard me and Mr. Young mostly here chatting. Do you want to ask your question first?
Um, yeah, mine is actually okay. My favorite line in the entire movie was the Cunningham line. Was that in the script, or did that just come out?
No, John and the producer Richard and the screenwriter Bill Phillips were pretty keen on the words. They weren't somebody that really just wanted to run off a script. So
Oh,
we stuck with what they wrote. But it is interesting to note two things. One, we probably used the word fuck and cunt more than any other movie before that, and probably only the what was the Pacino movie with the Cuban guy and the and stuff, the Scarface, right?
okay.
Uh, I think he used more fucks than we did, but otherwise, we probably had the most profane language of any movie up to that point of a mainstream movie. Interestingly enough, years later, I ran for state assembly. I was asked to run for statewide office here in California, and my opponent's name was Jordan Cunningham. They didn't let me call him Cunningham on the trail though.
I can't see why they would do something like that.
That's
I just
fantastic.
noticed, sorry to interrupt here, folks. Bill, you had a mason jar there. Are
Yep.
you, is there a particular drink you're going with tonight, or?
I don't drink any alcohol of any sorts.
Okay.
When I was a kid, I used to drink just to get fucked up. And my mother saw me hurling over a toilet one day and said, I don't know why anybody plans on being sick the next day. And that stuck with
That's
me.
great.
It was one of the most profound things my mother ever said to me. And since then, I haven't drank. So, what you're looking at here is, first of all, economical glasses. I mean, you can buy a dozen of these for like $12.
Yep.
Right? And if you buy a quote unquote glass, they're about $4 a piece or something. And my wife makes me some green tea, which I like. I drink a lot of green tea.
Right on. Sorry,
Cheers.
Bob. Did you have anything else you want to bring up before I go to the next person?
No, that was it. Thank you very much.
Okay, no, I'm sorry I cut you off. I wanted to make sure. Mr.
No,
Young.
I first off, I do not drink any alcohol whatsoever either. I quit drinking many years ago. And I always tell people it's the old Richard Pryor line for me that I was sick and tired of feeling sick and tired.
Yeah.
So I quit. So good on you.
Yeah.
But my question is, I'm a nerd. I got to go in another direction. To your behind the camera work.
Uh-huh.
And you worked on Mulholland Drive.
I did.
Which is one of my favorite movies of the last 50 years. And well, obviously we just lost David Lynch. Yeah. So I'd love to know what it was like working with him. But my root of my question is, were you brought on when it was intended to be a television movie / series, or when they decided to make it a theatrical release?
I couldn't tell you. I mean, I was asked to play a part in it and was offered the role, and it's a very small role. It was years after Christine. I wasn't actually working a lot at the time by choice. And well, to be honest, I had a son that died. And when my son died, there was a few people in the industry that reached out to me. And one of the things that you suffer when you have a child die is it's hard to get up in the morning, kind of a thing, right? So they were trying to encourage me and help me. And so they offered me, I got offered or invited for a number of different roles. I did some television stuff like Touched by an Angel and a few other things just to kind of get me through that period, because it was a really, really hard period. So I don't know whether or not it was scheduled for, as a theatrical release or the movie television series Piece of the Time. And, David Lynch, as far as working with him is concerned, he's an auteur. And if any of you have done film work, participated in any level of film, you realize that there's a story that was conceived, and there are about 200 people, more or less, that are influencing what that story looks like at the other end. And there are very, very, very few people who can control that narrative so that the imprimatur that's left is very much the director's. Woody Allen could do it. Rob Reiner did it in his early days. Certainly, David Lynch was one of the best. Kurosawa did it. And even, sorry, I'm blanking on, Lena Wertmuller could do it. Who is the Swedish director also? Bergman. So
Bergman
there are,
and Ken Russell. Ken Russell
too.
Could
Right.
do it.
So there's a handful of them that can do it, and David Lynch was one of those people that could do it. And so when you were on the set, you really didn't try to add unless you were asked. It was intimidating. So, for example, at one point there was a guy who was playing like the sound engineer within the movie, and he had on these headsets, and they said Sony in bright white letters on this black headset. And at that time, Sony had just sold or bought another studio, and David didn't want the audience to be looking like we're advertising for this other studio. So he started looking around to figure out how to block out Sony on there. And I had a suggestion, but I kept it to myself, which I'm angry to this day that I didn't speak up, because all I was going to do is take a black marker and just try to black out the white. Somebody tried putting tape on it and he hated that. But he didn't audition people either. He became very close with the casting director, and then the casting director would make suggestions and he would get a feel for it. He'd just bring you in and just talk to you. You wouldn't go through a formal audition. So he was rather unique. He also said, and you probably know this as a film historian, he went to therapy once, and I'll never forget this. He went to his therapist and he said, let me get this straight. If I come in here and I share my problems, my issues with you, you'll fix me and I won't have those issues anymore. And she said, well, that's more or less the concept. Yes. And he said, okay, thank you. I don't want this.
Yeah, no one should ever have tried to alter the mind that gave us his work.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. That was great to hear about working with David.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I actually have something here, Bill. And I was thinking about, and obviously I had you on the regular podcast a couple of years ago. And I've always, and we've exchanged messages back and forth a couple of times since then and such. I've always found you to be a open and honest guy.
Thank you.
And I'll be honest, I forgot about the issue with your son passing and such. And obviously I was doing some rereading this afternoon about things. I know you had traveled doing some charity work overseas. So if you can remind everybody, when did that happen? When did you go do charity work compared to the stuff with your son?
Well, my son wasn't born yet at that time. So
Okay.
I was going through a period where I really wanted to, I wanted a slightly different lifestyle, meaning that as an actor, when things are going great, it's fun. You travel, you're meeting cool people, and you're performing, and there's a lot of good stuff there. But sometimes you go through dry spells, or sometimes your employment is depending on whether somebody else wants you. That's not a comfortable place for me, because I've always been ambitious and I wanted adventure. So I read this great book called Cry of the Kalahari, which was written by these two Americans who went to Africa to study lions in the Kalahari Desert, because they wanted to understand how these lions could survive for 10 months without rain or without water. And so they went there and they wrote this amazing book, and I started reading it, and I thought, I want to be engaged like that. I want to be engaged every day, where I felt like my life was an adventure, like there was something happening. So I signed up to go to Africa I was going to volunteer for them. And actually I wrote their attorney and all kinds of stuff. And the attorney encouraged me to do it. But then there was this massive rain in Zambia, where Mark and Delia Owens had relocated their efforts to Zambia. And they never got my letter. And in the meantime, a friend of mine introduced me to some benefactors in Ojai, California, and said they are sponsoring a truck with the Save the Rhino Trust in Namibia, Africa. And they said, well, after talking to me, said, would you like to be a part of that? And I said, absolutely. I mean, I always sort of anticipated I was going to go to this jungle part of Africa, but that's actually only a central part of Africa. That's not like the tip or the north, right? So I ended up going to Africa as a self-funded volunteer for about a year. And I worked to save the black rhino. I worked on the cheetah conservation program. I was the first person to ever collect the folk tales of the Damara people in the Kwekwe language, which is a click language, by the way. Do any of you guys know how to speak click languages?
Brian, don't be a smartass.
I don't know if I insulted anybody. If so, I'm sorry.
Well, this is hello, Lenya. That's the whole hello in the Kwekwe language, right? And so I never was able to really master the languages, because they have like 37 different click sounds. And the question I always had for my friends was, how do you yell with a click? So anyway, I did that for a year. I collected the short stories of the Kwekwe people and got it in their native language, because these kids start school with their mother tongue only. They don't know how to speak the unifying language of, used to be Afrikaans, and then it became English. And we collected that. I got scholarships. Then we put together the first all donated public library in Africa. And then I got trash cans for the entire community. And then I decided that we needed to have a contest for the adults to sort of find people who could sell their crafts and their artwork to tourists so that they created some kind of employment. There was 85% unemployment there. And then we had scholarship competition, and then we decided to celebrate it with this big event where over 5,000 people came from all over the country. And the Dutch government was so impressed with it, they asked if I would do that in some other regions. But at that point, I'd met a woman that who lived in South Africa, and I kind of had my fill, so I came back at that point. But I did go back to Africa a number of times after that. In fact, last time was just a few years ago. I went and climbed Kilimanjaro.
Can I piggyback on that question real quick?
Please
And this
do.
may be a silly question, but the click language, is it a written language too?
Well, it was by a man named Bishop Colenso. He was an Englishman who came to South Africa in the mid 1800s, and he was the person who became the orthographer of the Zulu language and many of the other Bantu languages, which are click based. So yes, it is a written language. I don't know who specifically wrote down the Kwekwe language, whether it was an adaptation from Bishop Colenso, but it's a totally different language. So I doubt it. It most likely was somebody else. There was it was a country that was given to South Africa to watch over by the League of Nations. But before that, Germany had a large stake in it. So I don't know who actually,
Fascinating.
crafted it. But interesting stuff.
Yeah. And folks who've listened to the show will know I have a history background and such. And Brian does as well. And this is the first time I believe Brian and Bill have interacted. So that's why
It is.
I know he asked why he did. But it's things like that and answers like that why I always loved and respected Bill, because
Thank you.
he is has such a broad education with things, and it's not just, oh, well, you were Buddy and Christine, or you did this, or you, just from the acting standpoint. He has a broader scope of things. But before I continue, Ray, you mentioned you had something, so come on up, buddy.
Hey, what's up, Jonathan? And
Hey,
hi,
Ray.
Bill.
How you
My
doing?
name's Ray, and hey, I want to give you some compliments on your character. He did actually live up to his potential. He's a very bat. What do you call it? A bat. What do you call one of those delinquents? But he actually did a good job. You did a good job playing one, dude.
Thank
Hey,
you. Appreciate that.
hey, dude. I don't know how you did it, but man, that's just was like, wow. That's all I got to say. It's really good, man. Good
Oh,
acting skills, dude.
Thank you. It was based on a character I knew in high school.
all right. So, since Ray mentioned a compliment there, I gotta say this because I was obviously sharing about this, today especially, and I had somebody comment in one of the horror groups. I laughed. I thought it was funny. He said something along the lines of, "How many years did Buddy, the character, be left back in school because he looks like a full-grown adult compared to, everybody else?" But before you came in, because I know you, after I text you, you came in the room, Bill. What? How were you one of those guys like Keith, like trying to ask a lot of technical questions? Because I was explaining to the audience who was with us that Keith, after this movie or maybe back to school, went into the production and directing side of things. So were you one of those guys that were asking a lot of the technical questions?
Really not that much in that movie because John Carpenter, Brian, was also one of those people we should have added to the auteur list, really, shouldn't we?
Absolutely.
And so you learn from watching, and you learn from attitude with him more so than necessarily asking specific questions. Because at that moment in my life, my trajectory wasn't in the idea of becoming a director. I had done Mike's Murder with Deborah Winger, and I had done another picture in the Philippines, and I had done stuff that I was offered the to play the role of the teacher on Fame. I had options as an actor, and it felt like my trajectory was going in a direction that ultimately I wanted to do some directing, but it wasn't necessarily at the age of 23, which is how old I was when I was doing that. Um, it wasn't something that seemed imminent for me. And to be quite honest with you, Alexandra Paul and I started dating on that movie, and I was absolutely smitten with her. And we spent a tremendous amount of time with each other wherever we could, on set and off set. So yeah, the answer is no. I didn't spend a lot of time asking technical questions, but you learn. And the stuff that John taught me was also about attitude on a film set. I would never have a film set without bringing that sort of joy and sense of humor that John did, that puts everybody at ease.
I'll say this because I mentioned it before you came in the room to kind of see where we're at, Bill. But I had also reached out to Alexandria because she's been a previous guest and such. And I love her to death the same way as I respect you as well. Yeah, she's just one of those. There's just something about her that how can you not like her? From a personality standpoint. She
That's
did
my
say
wife.
hello, by the way.
That's my wife.
Yeah.
But what was it about Alexandria that really attracted you to her at the time?
Geez, I wonder.
No, well, besides the obvious, besides the obvious,
Well, listen, Kelly Preston was on the set, as well.
exactly.
And, I kind of flirted with Kelly, but I don't know, somehow it just didn't feel right. Um, for whatever reason, I just, it wasn't Alexandra. Um, had an innocence about her and an openness at that time that was incredibly appealing. So we went out on our first date one night, and I don't necessarily remember where we went. Maybe it was a movie, maybe it was, I don't know. But what I can tell you is I was driving an old 1955 GMC pickup. That was my ride. It had a 327 V8 and a Saginaw 4-speed in it. And but I had to open the door over on one side because it was an old truck, and you guys have all had old vehicles, right? So you know what that's like. You have to sort of apologize, but it is what it is. It's what you chose to drive. And Alexander came out of the truck, came around to my side, and reached in the window and turned my face to her and kissed me. And I was in love with her from that moment on. There was just some gesture of sweetness about it, and it's an affection that's lasted for us for 40 years now.
She still has the same, thing about her, like you said, from a personality standpoint. Aaron, go ahead. What do you got, buddy?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jonathan and Bill. It's awesome to have you on to meet you. This is fantastic.
Thanks,
Uh,
Aaron.
I have sort of a general question, and that is, what would you say was the biggest challenge working on Christine? And what would you say was your fondest memory? So, what did you enjoy the most? So, sort of a dual question there.
Well, I'll answer the second one first. The most fun part of it was beating the shit out of the car. I mean,
Oh, I bet.
you
Yeah.
have to imagine. I mean, are any of you guys car guys?
I'm
No?
not. I'll admit to not being a car guy till later on.
I'm not really a car guy either, but imagine that if somebody came to you and said, "Here, beat up this 2001, you know, Dodge, whatever, Dodge Commando, I don't know, whatever car it was," you wouldn't really think twice about it. And in 1983, when we were making this movie, a 1958 car was just barely regarded as an antique. Nobody really knew it. It wasn't particularly popular. And so somebody said, beat it up. There was no qualms about beating up this old car. It was just pure fun. Somebody is paying you to destroy something and there's no consequences. How many times do you have opportunities like that in your life? So that was for me one of the best and most fun things in the movie. other than meeting Alexandra. And the challenge, I didn't really have any great challenges on there. I was the first one that was picked for the movie of all the cast, to my knowledge.
Oh, okay. Mhm.
And so I had, what I used to do when I was working with John would be, we'd about ready to shoot a scene, and I'd say, John, do you want A, B, or C? And John would say, okay, let's go with B. And I'd say, okay, and we do that. And if it didn't work, then we go back and let's go back and try A just for shits and giggles. And so that's what was some of the takeaways that I also got from that movie was is that John had an efficiency about how he went about making his movies. And if you could tell him what you could give him these options for what he could choose, John doesn't dilly dally and say, well, let's try them all. He's like, no, this is what I want. And that's the markings of a great director, right? So I don't really think there was anything that was terribly challenging, although I will share with you that I thought I was getting fired after day one. And the reason was that my very first scene was with Steve Tash, where we drive my Camaro to the liquor store, and we're in the liquor store, and I have to take this bottle of, well, that was my improvisation that I stole liquor in the liquor store. But then as we're going out to the car, he says, hey, something about some girls. And I was like, oh, let's just go get Vandenberg or whatever. I just kind of like put him down, dismiss him. And in those days, everybody watched dailies, right? You develop the film, you watch the print film the next day, and then you'd get notes if for the director or somebody else. They called me after the next day, after seeing my dailies, and said I needed to come into the office. And I was like, oh, fuck, I'm getting fired, And they said, listen, you are coming off really cool, kind of like Jim Morrison kind of a thing. And we need you to be meaner. Can you do that? It's like, oh, yeah, of course. That's easy. That was easy. But that scene didn't give me that opportunity to really, display that or to expose that part of the character. So I think they were kind of looking at the leather guy with long hair and thinking Jim Morrison. They didn't want that. They wanted Buddy Repperton. And I was able to make that adjustment very easily because that scene wasn't really the right scene to give them that understanding of who he was.
Wow, that's amazing. I just want to say I'm glad they didn't fire you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I'm glad you got to stay on because
thank you.
I find the story you just told of A, B, and C with John so fascinating because if I go off on a little tangent,
you beat me to the punch, Brian.
I became pen pals and friends through the mail. This is back before email, kiddies, with Ken Russell for the last several years of his life. And he had told me a story that people always complained about working with Oliver Reed. Oliver Reed was so difficult to work with. And I always worked great with Oliver because you just have to learn Oliver has two faces, mean and meaner. So I would just say, give me face one or face two. And that's my direction to Oliver Reed. So it's kind of, I love that story. But two, I'll never forget going to see Christine in the theater, forcing my mother to take me because I was only 10 years old, 11 years old. And when you started beating the shit out of the car, that's the moment my mother leaned down to me and said, he's going to be in so much trouble. That was her whole take on
it. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Well, I'm actually curious because Brian hinted at and stuff there, but you mentioned about having the conversations with John Carpenter about A, B, and C on how you would approach things.
Yeah.
Was there any other directors that you worked with that you can actually have that honest conversation with as far as, hey, because obviously actors get to a certain point that they have that feeling on things, on the character. But was there any other directors you could say, hey, can we maybe try this direction or that direction or whatever the case may be?
Yeah, but I think that depends on the pace of the film. So like when I was doing North and South, this is a huge budget, huge amount of material to cover, locations, major celebrities from Elizabeth Taylor to Robert Mitchum to you name it. And there's a schedule that they have to keep. So there wasn't a lot of time to get into the weeds on who people were. You brought it and that was it, right? But different directors bring a different energy or a different style. And so you might have a conversation like A, B, or C, where John's is sort of straightforward, direct, and clear and clean. Jim Bridges, when I was working with him in Mike's Murder, was a former actor and a writer and a director and a sensitive person. So when he brought me in, or when he hired me to play Raunchy Randy, he brought me into a room with oh God, I'm suddenly blanking. Phil, hold on a second. Sorry, I had to look at my poster to remember Paul Winfield. Sorry. Did you ever do you remember Paul Winfield?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so Paul Winfield was gay, a large black man, and I was essentially like his beard, if you know what that means. So when he cast me, he brought me into the room and then just disappeared. So I just sat there with Paul for a while. Sort of feeling out relationships and things like that. And when I was doing Raunchy Randy, at one point there's this line in there where I say, yeah, he was giving a girl some drugs and I didn't like how he was treating them. Something to that effect. It wasn't exactly those words. And I didn't quite understand what he was referencing. And then he told me that he was on the beach with Jim Morrison back in the early 60s. And they would pick up these girls. Morrison would pick up these girls and give them a bunch of drugs and then abuse them. Not necessarily slap them or anything like that, but just kind of
take advantage
of them in a way that polite people might not do. So in those kind of circumstances, he was giving me A, B's, and C's. You see what I mean? But he wasn't looking for me to just give him a note. He was playing the melody or asking me to play a melody that fit that moment. And so the answer to your question is John was the most direct, which is why I liked that. And I liked that very much. As an actor, you want to know, oh, play this. But from him and even Martin Scorsese, I got to work with Martin Scorsese briefly. And it was kind of the same thing as, he's asking you to tell him where you're coming from at that moment. And if he thinks you maybe misunderstood where that person is at that moment, according to his interpretation, he might give you a little nudge in another direction. But a good director never tells you do this.
Can I ask you a question
Go
about
ahead, Brian.
Scorsese?
Go ahead.
It's really quick. Is he as just manic and fast talking on set as he is off set? Because I love seeing Scorsese as an actor. Just that manic, fast speaking personality of his. I can't imagine him on a film set being like that.
Well, my experience of him is that I auditioned for him with Barbara Hershey for Last Temptation of Christ in a hotel room in Westwood. And so my experience of him wasn't on set. Barbara Hershey wanted to play Mary Magdalene, and I was chosen to work with her by another director named Daniel Mann. And at that time, they were considering doing a Broadway production of On the Waterfront. And they had selected me to be the Terry Malloy character, the Marlon Brando character.
Wow.
And so because of that choice, they said, yeah, this guy will work with you. Because I would have loved to have played that role of Jesus in there that ultimately was played by Willem Dafoe, I think. And so working with Martin, he loves actors, good actors. And so he stands back and he listens and he watches. And then he maybe makes suggestions, but he doesn't talk a lot, but his wheels are going like that. I mean, this is a man who's way above average intelligence. So he's thinking about various angles and thoughts and ideas and trying to, digest what you're giving him. let that how that feels to him. But he wasn't manic at all. I mean, he's far too accomplished for that.
Because I could just see him coming in and saying, great, that was fantastic. That was wonderful. You were fantastic. Now why don't you sit over here and do it this way, but turn your head slightly to the left to do this. It'll be great. Try that. Because
That's because of his New York. That's his New York energy. But
that's how he comes across in his acting roles. It's
yeah,
wonderful.
Yeah, well, that's the New York energy, which is odd because him and Scorsese and De Niro come from the same place, and De Niro is quite the opposite.
Yeah,
but you find that in New York too, don't you?
you do.
Absolutely. And even though Brian's from Buffalo, even though I cringe at that, but that's a whole nother thing. And I know this is probably a semi odd question, but because you're in a different stage of life here. But thinking back to the movie, is there things you would want to change with the 2025 lenses compared to when it was made in 82, 83?
Of course, yeah. I mean, those kind of, I mean, roles are never finished. I mean, in my opinion, they're never really finished. And I believe that the one thing that I wish that I would have done differently was when the car is backing up that's on fire and about to pursue me down the road, I had a tire iron or billy club or something. I built a jack, something, a blackjack or something in my hand, or just a steel rod. And I kept that, and then I took off and I started running, and then I just chucked it to the side. And I really think that Buddy in that moment, as that car's backing away, he would have thrown it at the car. And that's the only thing that I really feel like, I would have liked to have done that again.
Just one of those little
say the hairstyle, because the hairstyle sells
it.
Well, to be honest, there's kind of a funny thing I saw online one time, and I don't know who or where, but I was voted best hair in horror film back in the 80s.
You might have my vote.
Well, you know what? This is
That's
probably
awesome.
off the cuff here, but what I know this from having talking to you and spoken with you and such. What led you to working on a farm and owning your own farm?
I grew up in the Midwest, and I always loved farming. That was my first love. And when I moved to
Wow.
California, I didn't really see wasn't a lot of opportunity for that. And to get into farming in California, the real estate is so expensive that it's hard to make a go of that but it's people used to ask me that sometimes, and imagine that it's one of the biggest palettes of creativity you can work on. I mean, I was farming 600 acres and I could do whatever the fuck I wanted with it. I mean, that's a tremendously invigorating responsibility, and I really enjoyed it. I love cows. I love animals. I like driving large tractors and making those decisions and coaxing things out of the soil. I don't know. It's just a very rewarding piece. Unfortunately, I don't think it's my highest and best use, and it took me a long time to figure that out.
Well, before I let Ed ask his question, what do you think is your best usage at this point?
At this point,
Where we sit right now?
that's an interesting way to put it. I'm not sure if I'm the right person to answer that question. I do do a lot of consulting. I'm asked a lot about for my opinions for a variety of things. I've traveled to 40 countries. I've done all kinds of different jobs and things because I wanted to. So I think the one thing that I can offer nowadays is, well, Einstein said, because the point of zero depends upon the observer, there can be no true point of zero. Does that concept make sense?
Absolutely.
All right. So the value of travel, the value of experience, the value of multiple jobs or multiple positions in life means that you've been in various positions around the 0 point or the assumption of a 0 point. And I think that rounds you off in a way that makes you a better or more compassionate or a more understanding human being. And if there's anything the world needs right now, it's more compassion and understanding.
Oh, that's what I was going to say. You said it's difficult for
Bravo.
you to answer. It'd be very easy for me to answer. It's your sense of compassion, your political activism, your knowledge. You're willing to speak out and help is needed more than ever, especially at this time. And your morals and values, I think, are you and people like yourself are what's going to help this nation go forward.
That's very kind of you to say. Do any of you, and forgive me if I don't realize this, do any of you follow me on Facebook or anything like that? I'm not in
I do.
very many social media. Oh, you do? Okay. So many of you know I'm very anti-Trump and I'm very much against what's going on in Washington right now. And I hope that I don't alienate you with my position. But Betty Davis said a long time ago that if everybody likes you, it just means you don't stand for anything. And for me, the hallmarks of a man are somebody who has convictions and stands for what they believe. Doesn't mean that we're always right or wrong, but you need to stand up. You need to have your voice heard. So I believe that part of what I bring to those discussions is, look, I've traveled to 40 countries. I've worked as a volunteer in Africa, self-funded volunteer for a year and a half. I've been a farmer. I've been an entertainer. I still work in the entertainment business. I do public speaking a lot. I do a radio program. I just have a lot of experiences. I think hopefully they bring a consciousness, an empathy, and a certain amount of wisdom to the discussion. And that's all I'm literally looking for, is hoping that I got a place at the table to talk about this stuff.
And if I can interject there, and we're not going to go politics and all that fun shit. And I tend to lean towards what Bill had said there. But I agree with you in terms of let's have the conversation, whether we agree, disagree, all that fun stuff. That's a whole different thing. But let's have the conversation. Edward, what do you got, buddy?
Oh man, how do I follow up all of that, man? It's been a great discussion, man. Just want to
Where's your
say
picture, Edward? I can't see you.
yeah, man, it's chaotic over here, dude. Plus my room is real dark right now, so I just leave it off. I'm
Right.
feeling a little under the weather too. Um, but yeah, man, I wanted to say I appreciate your time, and also wanted to echo what was said earlier, man. What a great performance in Christine. Um, I know, man, that character, not just a juvenile delinquent, but like a legit threat. I think before the car comes into play, it's like he's kind of the main threat, and you feel like he's the danger, but you also feel like, man, this guy's gonna get it at some point, which is always satisfying in horror movies, right?
Right.
But anyway, no, I was gonna say, man, one scene I really like in that movie too is when you're hanging out with your buddies in the car, and that Stone song is playing, "Beast of Burden," and it's just like a chill moment. And just for that moment, I think it kind of humanizes that character. Like, man, maybe this guy isn't so bad after all. He's just like every other teenager, just wants to hang out and cruise with his pals and have fun, have a good time. Was that something that you thought about in that moment? And then also, I was part B to that. Did you have a chance to hang out with those guys before y'all started shooting so that y'all could gel as a group, or did that just come naturally?
So when we were shooting that scene, there was no music playing. We had no idea what they were going to be playing with it. Coincidentally, it is one of my favorite songs. I love Beast of Burden. I think it's a great song. The way that we were shooting that scene is that we were on a sound stage, and they put up some lights behind us, and they had nothing but the body of the car, and that was not even the full body. And they had guys on these levers on either side of the car to lift the car to infer that we were turning, right? So that, when you go around a corner fast, you lean, the car leans a little bit into it, especially in those 1960 cars, because their suspensions were kind of iffy, kind of loose. Right? And so, as what was the author that's Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas?
Hunter Thompson.
Hunter Thompson. Brian, you might remember one of his famous lines from that movie or from that book, which I love. He talked about letting the air out of the tires, and when he was being chased by the cop, getting that sickening "here we go" sensation. I love that line. And so in the movie, when I turn the steering wheel like that, there are guys on the other side of the car lifting the car with a lever to kind of take the turn. And one of the things that I was really conscious about was how long I'm staring in the rearview mirror behind us to look at cars. Because I bet all of you have ever watched a movie and go, there's no way the guy could be looking off to the side.
I do that all the time.
Right? Or if they, or if they do it so furtively like that you go, well, that's not believable. Right? So in my head, I was thinking at that time, like, have I looked too long back there? Have I run into a telephone pole yet? And so when you watch the movie, tell me, was it okay? Did I look away too long?
I thought it was fine. I mean, especially because you're young, you're playing the teenager, or maybe to your point earlier, maybe a super senior, if you will.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, kids are like that, man. You're more interested in looking cool than being safe. So even if it was keeping your eye off the road a little bit, so be it. That's how kids are, man.
Yes. And you asked me a second part to that question, and I got carried away and forgot what it was. Can you
remind me? Just if you were able to hang out. Well, actually, I got another one too. I want to know too if you were able to drive Christine, man, and had a chance to drive the car.
While the movie was being filmed, I did not drive that car, but there were over 21 of those cars. 19 of them ran at one point, and 2 were cannibalized just for parts from the beginning.
It hurts.
I have heard some stories from others subsequently that said there may have been as many as 25. But when we were making the movie, I remember having this conversation. I was told 21. So whether it's 21 or 25, it's somewhere in that neighborhood. And the car that I beat up that night with the other guys, they had to restore that car and use it again because they were out of cars. And there was a body shop at one end of that building where we were filming, which was devoted just to the body work and fixing up Christine. And those guys were busy 24/7 putting these cars back together. So no, I never drove an actual Christine then. I did drive one later. And to your question about did I hang out with the guys? No, I didn't really feel a need to do that. I only knew Malcolm very, 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 very slightly. And I didn't have a good feeling about him, to be honest with you, because he had said something rather kind of disparaging about me to a mutual girl that we knew about my performance in Mike's murder. And so I kind of just let that one go. But the essence of the character of Buddy Repperton is, he's not going to be particularly affectionate or particularly buddy-like, friend-like with those guys. They hang around him. He doesn't hang around them. If you know what that means.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's kind of I'm hanging out with this guy because he's the tough dude, and if I'm on his side, nobody fucks with me.
That's right. And honestly, I don't think that Buddy wanted to choose guys like that to hang out with. They're like part of his defense mechanism. So if you remember in the football scene where Dennis screamed, right? And we're in the stands, and then all of a sudden we start cheering because he got hurt.
Yeah, that cracks me up every time.
Well, that was an improvised scene. I did that. I stood up and I started cheering like that.
It's so on point too.
Yeah,
it's funny that's improvised, man. It's so on character.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and John saw that and said, we need that in the movie. So then they filmed that, but it wasn't part of the script. That was something that I did because, I got to think that Buddy Repperton would have liked to have been out there playing football. He was an athletic guy. Or I kind of think that maybe he also recognized, he was held back. And he shouldn't even be at high school right now. So to be hanging out with these little fucktards, those guys, those guys are all great guys. Don't get me wrong. But as Buddy Repperton,
the character,
I want to hang around these little fucktards. No, They're like half my size. I don't want to hang out
Yeah.
with them.
Well, that makes sense too. Why he wouldn't, like you said, he's athletic, but why wouldn't he be on the team? Well, I mean, clearly he can't follow the script. He can't follow orders. He's not going to listen to coach.
Well, yeah. Plus that his grades probably
his
would.
grades sucked. Yeah, there's no way.
Uh,
Yeah.
all
Anyway,
right.
thanks for your time, man. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks, Edward.
Thanks. This is a rarity that she will speak up, but Miss Natalie, what do you got?
Yeah, I guess it is a rarity anyways.
Yeah. I mean that respectfully.
It's not that I'm not interested. It's just, I work very hard to come up with something, but I'm going to behave and I'm not going to get political. But I just wanted to say I appreciate what you said and, you using your platform the way you do and, spreading knowledge and awareness. But to follow that with a question, I did look you up on Facebook. I want to make sure I'm following the right page. There's one where I have a mutual friend. I'm sure we can guess who that is. Or do you have a professional page that's just for followers? I just want to make sure I'm following the right one.
No, there's just me. I have several pages, but one of them was for when I ran for assembly that still seems to exist, and I've had several pages for my nonprofit work that I've done for Citizens Congress and Citizens Congress Education Foundation, and then I think somebody set up a Buddy Repperton page. I never visited, and so if you've followed or you've reached out to me on that, I apologize. I'm just not very social media savvy. It just doesn't interest me, to be honest. So when I do stuff, it's usually just under William Ostrander. And yes, the common advice is separate your professional life from any of your, well, let's just say your political issues or your community involvement. But I'm unapologetic about it. Like I got
Yep.
conservative friends. I've got progressive friends, and friends are friends, and we learn from one another. I mean, sometimes we get rather caustic on Facebook. I don't care. I don't mind. Sometimes people share stuff with me that I learned something, but what I see most of the time is a very uneducated audience, and so I never feel like I have to hold back. I just don't, and I'm not going to apologize for that. So, if you can't see my work as my work for a movie and separate that from who I am as a person, that's your problem, not mine.
Yeah, I agree with you and I appreciate it. And I'm in the same boat. Normally I keep my mouth shut, but that's not really the case nowadays. But I just wanted to make sure I was following the right page because I'm definitely interested.
Natalie, I'll point you in the right direction.
Well, thank you, Natalie. I appreciate your question, and I appreciate your engagement on the one platform that I am on at the moment.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
if I can say this, as far as that is concerned, and it's funny because after I had the conversation that has been released with Bill, one of the first things he did was email me and said, "I hope that was okay for you," just because of everything we talked about, his running for assembly and just the whole gamut, which I'll put on this as well. But I accepted Bill for who he is, and I appreciated his truth per se. So, I appreciate you being you. But Mr. White, you mentioned you had a follow up. What do you got, buddy?
My follow up was can you hear me?
We got you.
Okay. My follow up was back to the previous. When in your life did you feel the most fulfilled? Is it now? I'm hoping.
The sage philosopher. Okay. Bob, I think that what we always, if we're conscious, if we're conscientiously approaching life, trying to live in the moment and trying to look at where we're going and where we are and our gifts and our place and all of that kind of stuff, one hopes that one is more contented as you go on and you try to get to a better place within that. And so from that point of view, yes, I think that I am more content than I once was. But there are things, and tell me if you agree with me on this. I think all of us, it's not that I think, I know that all of us have what I call Jeep tracks. The Jeep tracks are the neurological pathways that are formed when we're very, very young. And sometimes those Jeep pathways lead us into a shitty place. And sometimes they're really good.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're like me, and I'm going to just take a guess that you are, that it's very, very difficult to completely eliminate those Jeep tracks. And when it gets wet and rainy and you're trying to get someplace, sometimes you slide back into those. And then
Absolutely.
I beat myself up because how did I fall into that fucking Jeep track again? Right? Rather than
Absolutely.
I thought I resolved this.
Mm-hmm.
When I was 8 years old, my father, he was a very smart man, and he was very good at debate. But he actually told me he didn't like me as much as my brother and sister. So I felt very defensive and hurt around my father.
Wow.
He actually told me he loved my brother and sister more than me. And so when we get into these arguments, there was this giant wound in me. And I didn't understand why I had this wound and why this person who's supposed to be my protector would injure me, who wouldn't protect me. So I started arguing back. And fortunately, my father did allowed me to argue back.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens, though, when you're 8 years old arguing up to your father, you don't have the intellectual or or life experiences that they do. And then top of that, my father, as I told you, was a smart guy. He was a good debater. So you had nowhere to go with him except get bigger and get louder. And so to this day, when I get mad and I scare people sometimes unintentionally because I think I'm at 4 and they think, oh my God, this guy's going to kill me, and I'm not. I have no interest. I have no interest in beating somebody up like that. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I still fall into that Jeep track sometimes of when I don't feel like I'm being heard, I call it arguing up. I start, I get like this as if my father is still standing in front of me as a full-grown man in front of an 8-year-old. So that was a long-winded answer, but hopefully we all relate to that.
No, that was a perfect answer. I get that completely. I completely get that.
Wonderful. And if they remake Christine, you look like Buddy Repperton at 65 years old.
Typical Texan. Yeah. Well, I think I asked you this, and I'll put a bow on this as far as having Bill here. Uh, I think I had heard a couple of years ago they were going to do a Christine remake. But let me actually bring this up because I did have a fan message in. Let's see. We'll end with this. William, does it seem like a little older looking? Do you seem like you were a little older looking compared to the rest of the main cast? Because this fan thought you may have been in your early 20s. Was that intentional with your casting? And if so, did you play Buddy like you had failed grades and been held back a couple years?
The answer to the question is yes, they felt that he was somebody who was held back. Yes, he should have looked older than the other kids. Yes, my character was played as if he were resentful of still being in school, which is what I talked about with my buddies, and at the football game. My character was modeled after a guy that I knew in high school named Bill Porter. And Bill wasn't held back multiple years, but I know he was at least a year, maybe as many as 2 years or so older than me at the same grade. And he was terrifying to those of us if he got mad. And he had those mutton chop sideburns that I had. That's where those came from. Was basically that. As far as my age was concerned, I was 23. I get the question a lot. Doug Warhit was 28. Alexandra Paul was 19. John Stockwell, I think, was 22. Keith Gordon was 20, 21 or 22. Um, Malcolm was, I think, 19 or 20 or 21. Everybody in the cast was well out of high school. And so, in their age ranges, for me to be 23 compared to John Stockwell's 22 was the right thing to do, honestly. So, when I got the part, before I got the part, I was called in by the casting director, Karen Ray, who I had auditioned for in something else previously, and she brought me in. And the way auditions used to work was your agent would submit you for a role, the casting director liked you, and then would call you in for essentially a pre-interview. And if they didn't know your work, then you might have to read for them to find out whether or not you're going to go on to the next level. So she had already heard my work before, so she wasn't afraid of that. She just wanted to talk to me. And at the end of the meeting, she said, "You know what? I think you're perfect for the character of Buddy Repperton." And I went, "Oh, great," not knowing what she meant by perfect. And if you've ever read a movie script, you'll know that on the page, when a character is introduced, it's very common, especially in the older days, to write something about who that person is or what they look like. So in the script, and I'm paraphrasing, but it said something to the effect of, Buddy Repperton is tall and broad-shouldered with a yank of dirty blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail and a mean and stupid-looking face. And she said I was perfect for it. So I thought, oh, wow, okay. I guess I have
Is that a backhanded compliment a little bit?
So anyway.
But all right. Obviously, I want to be respectful of your time. Whether it's acting or non acting, what do you got going on next, Bill?
I had a couple of films that were offered to me. I turned one of them down. Another one is still trying to raise money for. I've been doing more voiceover work lately. And if any of you need any voiceover work, if you know somebody that needs some voiceover work, reach out to me because, that's something that I'm enjoying. I still do consulting on issues that are political and as well as in construction and real estate. I'm a consultant for those kind of things. I did write a bill for Congress that many of you may not know that about me, but I wrote a bill called the Corporate Political Expenditure Disclosure Act, which is an attempt to force publicly traded companies to reveal their campaign contributions. That's a nonpartisan issue, but it's money in politics. It's corrupting, the outcomes that we get. I've written a bill for our city called the Integrity in Our Elections Act, which has to do with campaign finance reform. So I presently assist our congressman in helping to negotiate the issues of the Farm Bill. And so I guest host a radio program where I get to talk. It's kind of like 60 minutes, audio 60 minutes. And I do that program. I'm oftentimes brought on to discuss, political issues. So right now, I'm doing voiceover work. I'm doing some consulting, and these various and sundry other things in my life.
Nice. Well, I am going to send you over in an email probably in the morning. We had a couple requests for autographs and stuff, so I will send you their emails. That way, you guys can arrange payment and all that fun stuff. But Bill, I appreciate the time. Thank you for hanging out with us and taking everybody's questions.
I'm happy to do it. You got any questions? Go ahead. Now's your chance. If you'd like to get an autograph or a photograph, stuff like that, it's easy. You send it to I'll give the address either to Jonathan or to wherever.
However you want to do it, sir.
Whatever way you want to do it, either. It doesn't matter to me. If you guys are all connected, that's cool. Just Facebook message me, personal message me with your request. It's $40. It covers, postage and my pictures and the time that we take to do it. It's the same thing we charge at the autograph shows. And I'll send you a movie stills. I do video greetings like Cameo. I'm not on Cameo. They've invited me to be, but I don't really want to be right now. but I do videos for people if they want to send out birthday greetings or messages or just for fun pranks or whatever. I do some of that stuff, and and any voiceover work that you might want. I enjoy doing that. It's really fun to meet you guys, and thank you for your questions. I'm happy to do it.
All right. Yeah, there's a couple of people I have on the list that I'm going to send a bill. Just let me know, and I'll pass along to him, and we'll get that all set. But Bill,
Thank you so
sir.
much for joining us.
Have a good
My
rest of your
pleasure.
night, sir.
Thanks
My
a lot.
pleasure.
We appreciate you.
All right,
Thank
man.
you.
You guys are all on the East Coast, right?
Yes, sir. Well, we're
Yes.
all over the place. We have Texas, we have
I'm in Texas.
New Mexico, we have all over the place, sir.
Well, good on you guys, and thank you for supporting the film, and thank you for your invitation. I really appreciate it. It's very flattering.
Thank you, sir. Have a good rest of your night.
Go well.
All right. All right. So before I let everybody go, let me go ahead and pick the winner for the license plate. I just got to pull it up again. Let's see. Because I closed that out. There we go. Because I was a dumbass and closed that out with the movie. So, I made this mistake one time. Oh, there we go. Yay. Let's see. We go with that. Yeah.
What are you showing?
It's-
Is it like a spin the wheel? Oh, cool.
Yes, we are. Mr. Vitar.
Oh, very cool.
Right on. All right.
Congratulations. Woohoo.
Mr. Ed.
Awesome. Ray.
Hold on. I will. Oh, that's my thing. I will be in. Everybody, thank you and have a great rest of your night.
Everybody,
you,
was
sir.
great to see y'all again. Thank you so much, Jonathan. Thank you so much, my friend. I am going to bed. Good night.
And Brian, text me
Thank
before
you.
you go to bed. Thank you,
Good
guys.
night, Bill.
All right. See you later. Bye, everyone.